And now on to our last live session of the day called Building Intentional Dialogue and Equity in Aquaculture. Moderating our panel, it is my pleasure to welcome Imani Black, founder and CEO of Minorities in Aquaculture. Imani, over to you.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Imani Black. I am the founder and CEO of a nonprofit called Minorities in Aquaculture that I started in 2020. We'll get into that a little bit later, but I want to welcome our panelists to turn on their cameras so we can begin our conversation. As they are doing that, I will say that the goal of this panel is one, that all of our panelists are MIA members. And so for those of you who don't know what MIA member is, it is a woman of color that is a part of our organization, a part of our network that we are supporting in their journey of aquaculture. So this panel, I really wanted to bring, internally the members of Minorities in Aquaculture to have this conversation about the current status of DEI work in aquaculture, and then our different perspectives, even though we are women of color. So I know that we're a little bit into our time, so I will get started with the introductions. And so Taja, will you start us off with your introduction? Where are you from? A little bit about you, and then Anushka, you will go, and then Natalie, you will go.
Hey, so thank you to everyone who's spoken today. It's been super awesome to hear from all these beautiful and amazing women. I'm Taja Sims Harper. I am a PhD student at the University of New Hampshire currently in my third year. I'm originally from Oakland, California, and I earned my bachelor's degree at the University of Maine in Orono. Graduated in 2017. Sorry, there is a... Anyway, my research currently is focusing on microplastic pollution in the Great Bay Estuary here in New Hampshire, where I'm looking at microplastics in living and non-living resources, trying to create like a baseline data set just to see where we're at as far as like what's consuming microplastic, how much of it, things like that. Basically, just creating that. But eventually, later on in my career, I do want to get into education and kind of extend to the youth scientists and kind of get more, especially women of color, into marine biology, and kind of just bridging the gap between what we're all doing with just the younger group of people. So, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Anushka?
Hi, everyone. My name is Anushka Concepcion, and I'm an extension educator with the Connecticut Sea Grant Program and University of Connecticut's Cooperative Extension System. A little bit about me. I grew up in New York City, in Jamaica, Queens specifically, and I went to UNC Wilmington for my bachelor's degree in marine bio, as well as University of Rhode Island for my master's degree in fisheries, animal, and veterinary sciences. Between my two degrees, I worked at a shrimp hatchery in the Florida Keys, where I did mostly the microalgae culture. But shifting focus now to my current position with Sea Grant, I work with multiple sectors in the aquaculture industry, more specifically and most recently with seaweed farmers, as well as the other seaweed sectors or other sectors that support the seaweed industry.
All right, thank you so much, Anushka. Natalie?
Hey everyone, my name is Natalie Abdo. I was born and raised in Miami, Florida, and I'm currently in Tampa, Florida. I am a graduate student at the University of Florida's online Master's in Fisheries and Aquatic Science program. And I am also a hatchery manager at a bivalve hatchery in St. Petersburg, Florida. I graduated with my bachelor's degree in environmental science and policy in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, and actually ended up being a freshwater ecologist after I had graduated. And today is my first day at my job as a hatchery manager. So it's really exciting. After 3 years of trying to pursue the aquaculture industry, I can say I'm sitting in it. So
perfect. Well, yeah, so that's a little bit about, oh, and I guess I should do a little introduction about myself as well before we get started. So like I said, my name is Imani Black. Before I became the founder and CEO of Minorities in Aquaculture, I was a oyster farmer working in hatcheries, nurseries, and different farms along the eastern shore of Virginia and Maryland. Graduated from Old Dominion University, was a Division I athlete, graduated with my marine biology degree, and got into aquaculture through the Virginia Institute of Marine Sciences Oyster Aquaculture Training Program. Ever since then, I've been in aquaculture from 2018 to 2020. I was the assistant hatchery manager for the first privately owned shellfish hatchery in the state of Maryland. And then in 2020, I started Minorities in Aquaculture and then became a master's student at University of Maryland Center for Environmental Sciences at their Horn Point Laboratory in Maryland in 2021. So that's a little bit about me. And so I think, we'll move into the conversation because I'm really excited, especially with all the other panels that have happened before us. I think that this conversation really fits and rounds out a lot of the, amazing conversations that all the women have been having so far. So I want to start off with the question of, or just the statement of, all of us really on this panel right now are a double minority in the space of aquaculture, not just being women, but being a woman of color. That makes us a double minority in the sense of that women are already, lacking in many sectors of aquaculture, but so are really women of color. You don't really see a lot of women of color that are in leadership roles, which was one of the reasons why I started Minorities in Aquaculture. So Anushka, let's start off with you. Let's kind of wrap up why you got involved in aquaculture and fisheries in the first place, and how has being a woman of color impacted your career so far from where you're sitting right now, at Sea Grant?
Sure, thanks. So what really got me interested in aquaculture was the desire to provide safely produced, responsibly produced food for the world. I always had an interest in marine science, got my degree in marine biology, or my bachelor's degree in marine biology, but then it was the now what? And what can I do that's meaningful? And it was really on a trip to visit family in India, where we visited one village, or my father's village, and my father said, "Look around at all these people in the village. Can you imagine, with your degree in marine science, being able to feed everyone in the village with really healthful foods?" And that's what did it for me. That's where I had an aha moment. It clicked. I said, yes, it makes sense. And knowing what I know now, we can do it in a very responsible way, responsible for the environment, to ensure food safety as well. It can be done. And there's nutrients from the ocean that you can't get anyplace else except the ocean. And so that's really the reason why I'm so passionate about aquaculture. And really some of the challenges, or for me, what it meant or means to be, a woman of color in aquaculture is, it is that representation. When I got started, nobody looked like me. And so something that we've discussed previously, Moni, is as a child growing up, I just didn't have those role models. I didn't see someone who looked like me in this area, but it was also being discouraged at pursuing this path. Wasn't traditional, for someone like me. I'm an immigrant, and those are what I found frustrating. And now that I'm a part of Minorities in Aquaculture, I've sort of found my people and folks that understand some of the challenges that I face, but also that sounding board with women who have similar experiences that I do. And that's really what, and I hope I answered the question. I'm sorry, you could repeat the question.
Perfect answer. And sort of moving into that same question, Natalie, being, where you are now as a recent graduate, but also, we've had our own conversations about the things that you have gone through just being, a minority in many senses of aquaculture. So can you just touch on, why you got involved into aquaculture and how being a woman of color with many different experiences with microaggressions, being a woman of color, and also other aspects of your life, how's that affected your career so far?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Let's see. So when I was an undergrad, I had originally started out my degree as a pre-med student. Growing up, I don't really think that there was any other options but pre-med or engineering in my household. I'm second generation of immigrant parents, and my parents worked really hard to get me where I'm at. And I'm a representation of them in every single way, every single day. And that was something that was completely enforced by me. And in my household, at least, it was like, we want to be better than the next generation. Every generation needs to get better, right? And so my dad is an electrician, my mom's a teacher. How can I be better than them to benefit the next generation? Pre-med it was. But I ended up taking a class, an aquaculture class by Dr. Kevin Main, who is the head of things at Moat Marine Aquaculture Park. And I was like, I've always loved marine biology growing up in Miami, always loved the ocean, and was like, how I can't do this because it doesn't make a lot of money. And I don't know if that's going to benefit like my next generation, again, like wanting to honor my parents and my name. And, but there was just this tug at my heart. And my parents growing up, they always said to me, like, no matter what you do in your life, make sure you love it, because you'll never work and you'll give back to people, because it will just come from a place of joy. And so I took that class and kind of that was like halfway through my sophomore year of college, and realized I needed to change my degree to environmental science because it was too late to do anything else unless I wanted to go in extra credit hours. And I just kind of put my head down and started kind of grinding away. I was like in every internship I could possibly get into. I was at an aquarium. I was at like a sustainable like urban farm in Tampa Bay that had like an aquaponics system that used tilapia. So I was like, as much as I could get involved in aquaculture or like sustainable agriculture that connected the two, I was like, let me jump in this. So I was kind of like a chicken with my head cut off, but wasn't anything new to me. It's kind of how my parents raised me. So anyway, was really trying to get into the aquaculture industry, but it was really difficult. Every person I connected with, every person I talked to, it was just like one door was closing, another one. You don't have the experience. I got really weird looks. Well, not only I'm white passing, which is, I guess, a benefit, but when I'm in spaces, I'm not white. I don't act white. I also happen to be gay. So there's like just all these things that are kind of against me. And in a lot of spaces, I was just, there was a lot of microaggressions, like you mentioned. So after I graduated, I couldn't get into the aquaculture industry because COVID hit, and there was just like no way I could. So I got into freshwater ecology and snagged a job with the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, and had been there since February 2021, where I experienced, it wasn't the aquaculture industry, but it was very similar. I experienced so many microaggressions, so many ways in which I wasn't being protected or taken care of, or even recognized, and in a lot of ways insulted on multiple levels of who I was. And then I wondered why there was no one else who looked like me, or there really wasn't any other minorities in general in these spaces. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it definitely does. And I think the one thing that, as I move on to you, Taja, because, for everyone in the audience, like I said, all three of these lovely ladies are MIA members. So we have all individually had our own in-depth conversations about our experiences and how they are very similar, but also very different. One of the commonalities with within minorities in aquaculture and, you know, our 100+ members is that we are all women of color of some sort, but, you know, and have faced microaggressions, but maybe in different sections of our career, which have, you know, affected how we've moved forward or how we've, you know, perceive the aquaculture industry in the next steps of our career. So, you know, Taja, one of the things that we've always talked about is the kind of safety of our spaces, but also just the feeling like that is your space and that I belong in this space, you know what I mean? And so can you just touch on a little bit about that, how that's kind of played into your career so far, and then how you got into aquaculture and how like that sort of your perspective of aquaculture has changed based on some of the things you've experienced so far?
Yeah, so I kind of have similar stories to both Natalie and Anushka, where like my family, I grew up in Oakland. We're not next to the ocean per se, we're near the bay, but it takes like an hour and a half to get to any beach, or like a nice beach at least. And my family, I'm the first in my family to like do higher education. So like there's not really much to fall back on as far as like questions I have, or like what should I do? And like no one is involved in marine science. Like I don't come from like a fishing background per se. So not a lot of my family was like, a lot of them are like, marine science. They're like, why, what? They're like, what are you gonna do with that? And I'm like, I could do a lot of stuff with that. I don't know yet, but I love the ocean and I love animals, and like I'm gonna make it work. Like, I don't know. So when I started getting into these spaces, I obviously noticed that I was like, it was rare to see someone like me. Like I didn't see a person that looked like me with like curly hair and like, you know, and I went to Maine from Oakland, very, very different culture shock. So I had to like learn how to be in that space. And so it is a struggle, and it can be isolating for sure. Just learning how to navigate and just be in the space and knowing that you have a voice. And I had to learn that like what I have to say is important. And I need you all to sit down and listen to me, because I have a lot to say and I have a different perspective, and I can add to this conversation, and I can add things that you probably haven't like thought of as far as like aquaculture goes, because I'm super passionate about it. And I still get the question like, well, why are you pursuing a PhD? Like, why are you doing aquaculture? Like, like, what's the point? Like, are you a master's student? I'm like, no, PhD, like I'm going all the way up. Like, so I still get these questions, and I still struggle with like making my voice heard, and trying to kind of connect with people that may not understand my background and like where I come from, and that I have to also deal with not only academic struggle, but like a home life, like a home struggle with my family. So I have to, you know, learn how to balance that. And it's hard being in this space when people don't necessarily understand that dynamic. As far as like getting into aquaculture though, I did have really great mentors. All that aside, I had great mentors in my undergrad that gave me these opportunities. My junior year going into my senior year of undergrad, I had a mentor, Dr. Paul Rawson, who put me on a project with him where we were working with blister worms and oysters, and he physically brought me to oyster farms, and that's where I got introduced to oyster farmers. And I was like, this looks awesome, and I can work on the water, and this can be my job. Like, this is cool, I can do this. And like solving a problem, like I think that's my biggest push to be involved in aquaculture, is like, where is there an issue and how can I help? Like, how can I find a solution for you? So that's kind of where I was like, I think aquaculture would be awesome just to like not only do like work in, but also for a science background, like how can I fix problems?
Right.
So that's kind of where my passion comes in. It's like, how do I fix and how can I help? And all
Right.
that.
I think the commonality in all three of us, you know, like I've realized like over the time getting to know all of you in kind of different ways. Taja being the very first member of Minorities in Aquaculture that I ever got to connect with. And so she knows that she will always hold a special place in my heart for that, because, you know, being in the spaces, like we all said, you know, we love what we do. And I think a lot of women, just like in, you know, the other panels, we have a really great passion for the things that aquaculture can do, for the sustainability, for, you know, the communities that aquaculture can help. One of the things with Minorities in Aquaculture that I originally, you know, kind of got started on and was like on a mission on was finding other women of color that looks like me. So even though I had grown up in, you know, predominantly white spaces, I think that fogged my lens a little bit as I was going through my career, because it wasn't foreign to me to be the only one. I knew, and kind of like what, you know, what Natalie was saying, it was, you know, I knew what my role was as the only person of color in that room. I knew how to behave. I knew how to show up. I knew what was expected of me as the only one, as the token, as like a lot of people say. So with Minorities in Aquaculture, I was really kind of set on in the beginning of finding other women of color that, like you guys were saying, that I didn't have to explain what was happening. They already knew. I could just have a conversation and be real about my feelings that were happening. And so, you know, like for example, I was the hatchery manager, like I said, at the first Pavilion Hatchery in Maryland. And there would be multiple times where people would come in and, you know, I worked with two other women at the time, and they would come up to me and say, oh, you know, is the manager here? And I'd be like, oh, well, I'm the assistant manager. Can I help you with something? Oh, you are? And I'm like, yeah, like, can I help you with something? Oh, well, where's the manager? And I'd be like, oh, well, she's kind of busy. Like, can I help you with something? And then other people being like, oh, are you just getting like, you know, college credits? Are they like allowing you to be here? When I was pretty much running the hatchery. And then explaining that to people who haven't been in that situation was difficult, because I had to explain the microaggression. I had to explain that feeling of all the different past microaggressions that I had faced leading up to that, because I wasn't encouraged to get into aquaculture. So my push and my passion really is what has gotten me here. So on the, you know, topic of that, you know, I really have built or tried to have built Minorities in Aquaculture, and all three of you know, to be a vehicle for all of the women of color and all the underrepresented demographics, you know, leading up, you know, as we develop more, so that it's our organization, that, you know, the platform and the advocacy is ours, not just what I think. Just because I'm a woman of color doesn't mean I know what you need, Taja, or what you need, Anushka, or what you need, Natalie. So in that, how has Minorities in Aquaculture, in all the different kind of times that you guys have entered into the organization, how has having that organization kind of changed or supported your journey, you know, and all the things that you've gone through? Taja, I'll start off with you being the very first member. What was sort of your initial thoughts? And so how you've been with me the longest. So how is that really kind of your journey for you?
I just have to say that, and I say this to you all the time, and I've said this so many times, but I really, really do appreciate you for starting this group. Like, I think it was like within a 2-week span, like I had a friend that I was talking to and I was like, man, like, I just feel so isolated. Like, I feel like I really want a group of women who can understand me, from not just like in aquaculture, because there's a lot of women around me who are in aquaculture, but like being of color in aquaculture and like this very like small group that I'm a part of. Like, I just want like people that I can reach out to when I need help. And then like she sent me your information literally like a week or two later, and I didn't cry per se. I was very emotional. But I was super happy that she sent it to me, because I was like, this is literally what I'm talking about. Like, this is amazing. So then I reached out to you, and like, you know, rest is history. But MIA has been super vocal of and like just giving me more opportunity. Like the first time I think we met, like we went to a kelp farm, because I told you I'm like, I'm super interested in like kelp farming and I want to learn more about it, but like I don't know how to like get into that. And then you were like, all right, well, I have this person and like let's just go see them. And like we did that. So and then there's been conferences that like I've wanted to go to, that like the organization has like helped get me to like meet people and network. And so it's been just super awesome, because I've just been in more rooms, I think, because there's a huge support from the group. And just having that network of like other women who are literally all over the place, and like back home in California, like I can go home and like see someone and they're an MIA and we can just like discuss things. And like, so it's been super supportive just to have like this group and like get me places in rooms and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Anushka, in this kind of tier, you're the next one. So I'll let you take a brief moment to answer that question, and then we'll move to Natalie, and then we'll get to our last and final kind of big picture question.
Sure. So I have told you this before, Imani. I wish I had something like this 20 years ago when I first started. Because again, talking with Natalie and with Taja, it is a feeling of being, or the feeling of being isolated and being the only one and standing out. And already that can be very, jarring for someone, especially who's entering the aquaculture space, all eyes on you when you walk in a room because you don't look like anyone else. But even still having similar stories of being dismissed, being talked over. I was talking to someone, at a conference, and that person literally just walked away from me. And others around me saw it and didn't say anything, and it's things like this. But having a space where I can discuss all of that with you, and knowing that you've had the similar experiences, it makes me feel that I belong, but it also gives me a sense of, well, now it's time for me to give back. I want you to know you're not alone. I'm here to support you, and I can understand what you're going through, and forming those relationships and letting you know I have your back as you move on into your, throughout your career. And that's what MIA means to me. It's again, having that space, but being able to talk with Taja, and saying, I have this question, I need help, no problem. Because I was just where you are, 20 years ago. I know what you need. If I don't know what you need, you can tell me what you need, and I will do whatever I can to support that, because, we don't necessarily, and again, it's a comfort level too. No one really knows sometimes what we go through, and some of the challenges we have being women of color, and sometimes just can't explain it. And again, I know I'm saying the same thing over and over again, but yeah. Really this organization, to me, it's more than just an organization. And I'm also a mom. I bring that up all the time, but my daughters look like you, and knowing that you are going to be there when they, become your age, and you then, it's like a full circle moment. The three of you will be there for my kids, just like I, hopefully can be there for you.
Absolutely. And you definitely have been on many different aspects of the organization since you came on. Natalie, you're the newest member of the crew, so what has MIA done for you since you found out about our organization, since we kind of met, because we met at the Women of the Water Conference in Florida? So just give me like a little brief overview of kind of what that was like and what that's been like for you.
Yeah. Well, when I had seen you, Imani, I think we both looked at each other and kind of did one of these, like like an acknowledgement that there was people in the room who could understand each other. And I think that, so I'm in Florida. I think I'm the only Floridian MIA-er. I'm not gonna take that.
There's another.
There's another one. Excuse me. But we don't have as big of a community as like up in the Northeast or MIA in general. But I will say that the connections that I have made allow me and remind me that I'm not alone. I think it's easy for all of us to like talk about like our experience as people of color and as women. And I think for those of you who aren't women of color, you're women, right? So you understand what it's like to be in a space and see somebody who looks like you. Add another layer onto that. For us, right? We find somebody in the room who looks like us, who can understand us in a different way, because our cultures have made us different, and where our parents come from and the way that they've taught us to do things makes us different. Yeah, we're all humans, but there is a different experience people with different ethnic backgrounds have compared to those who are white. So in that, when I met you, Imani, when I interacted with my fellow MIA members when we were doing a dry run of this talk, and when I've just seen the community that you've created through MIA, Imani, through this little dream that you had, I think it has just given me hope, and it also kind of like lit a match under my behind and was like, I need to go do what I love, because like it's important to see people who look like you in spaces, and it's like you meant, like you guys have mentioned it before, like what would it look like if somebody who looked like us was here 20 years ago? Right. Maybe we would have been more confident to choose aquaculture to begin with, or pursue it like guns a-blazing. So
right, exactly. Yeah, and I appreciate all three of you. And I know that we are itching to get to this final question. We have some questions in the chat that we're going to touch, that this question is going to touch on. But one of the questions was, is MIA just on the Eastern Seaboard? And no, it is not. We actually have over 100 members that are all over the world, East Coast, West Coast, and internationally. So any woman of color, right now we are focusing on that demographic, and like I said, branching out to other represented demographics within aquaculture with our programming and things like that. But if you're a woman of color, please join our network. It is not, catered to just one location. But the final question, and I think this is really important, and this is something that I've been trying to do when I've been doing DEI workshops and DEI talks, is that, we've been having this conversation about DEI in aquaculture since 2020, since I started Minorities in Aquaculture. And there is very little action items that are given to people very readily that they can take back. And so, being in academia, being in commercial, being in industry, I feel like, some of the other ladies, Diane and Jennifer, just for examples, they kind of brought it up. How do we start moving toward intentional DEI in aquaculture? Well, having that diverse applicant pool is one. But I think, and you guys, agree or disagree with me, absolutely, is you have to make sure your organization is prepared for diverse applicants before you go and seek them out. You can't ask people that are people of color or people that you haven't had in your organization before to come on board and be present with what you want them to do if they don't feel safe enough to do it. So before you have the great idea of how do I cast my net out wider? Why am I having difficulty hiring, people of color and retaining them? Well, you have to look internally first and be like, okay, is this safe for any demographic that walks into my door? So I'm just gonna go around each and every one of you, just say, one or two things that the aquaculture industry can do moving forward to have more intentional DEI work and minority engagement. Natalie, I'll start with you.
I'm just gonna say I agree with you, Imani. Like, you need to create spaces. Your space needs to be comfortable for a person of color to step into. I left the state of Florida because I was just continuously, I don't even know what the right word isn't the right word for a space like this, but I was continuously harassed, discriminated against, made fun of in public spaces in our lab area on a weekly basis. I was ignored for multiple weeks at a time. And there was nothing I could do because the only thing in HR talked about sexual harassment and assault. And then you wonder why they don't keep people of color. Right. And then I wondered why the last person who was a person of color was there a month before I left.
Right.
So you do need to create a space, and that's easy to say, right? We can go watch a YouTube video and figure out how to create that space. But it also, the training that goes along with that to make your company more welcoming needs to be taught by a person of color. And having conversations where there's space to ask hard questions. I don't think everybody is discriminatory. I think that they don't ask questions because they're never given the space to do so because they've never met somebody who's different than them. So if you create spaces and conversations, I think that that's a really great way to do it.
Yeah. And Taja and Anushka, I'm going to also throw out another thing that I had on my list of how do people get a diverse applicant pool that a lot of people didn't know that I learned over the course of MIA is the language that people use in job postings. For example, if we look at the cultural statistic, let's say for African Americans specifically, 64% of African Americans do not know how to swim. So if you say on a job posting in aquaculture, ability to swim, you've eliminated half of the people that could have applied for that job. So language like that, we have to be very careful of. So is there anything else that we have to be really careful of, Anushka or Taja, that we haven't said before that is kind of how can people do something tomorrow to make their organization or their company more diverse? Yeah, Anushka, you can take it.
So first of all, I'm going to say, try not to be cognizant to just to check boxes. We are more than just boxes to check. And going back to what you said, Imani, about being cognizant of the language used in job postings, it's trying to make an effort to, or just not trying, making an effort, I should say, in understanding who you're trying to recruit. If the posting requires swimming, sometimes, it's good to be upfront, but then it's important to look at other positions that a diverse group of applicants can apply to. And then that goes back to even in the community. If you want to encourage, say, students, young students, children still in grade level students, to learn more about aquaculture, it's important to reach that group, that age group, early on, because one, they can see that aquaculture is an opportunity for them. Two, if they can know early on the type of skills that are needed and have experience or exposure to practicing these skills and learning them, that is your applicant pool right there. It's nurturing the next generation. And so, maybe the applicants are not available tomorrow, but making the effort to reaching out to the future applicants. I think that is something that's not being done. And practical skills. It's more than just saying, oh, this is cool, this is an oyster. Yes, but what are the technical skills that they need that they can learn? My 6-year-old can do some of this stuff, but if she's not exposed to it and she doesn't know that this is an opportunity that's available to her, just like it's available to anyone else.
Right. Yeah.
She's not even going to consider aquaculture as a field.
And the big, people who have heard me speak before, they know that I say ad nausea, we have to start meeting people where they are. And I hate the term building, the bridge, because then that means that there are two sides and that we're separated. It's building the dialogue. It's starting young. It's getting those resources in at an early age and then cultivating that throughout their career so that they can see themselves having that marine occupation. Taja, did you have anything to add? One of the other things was casting a wider net to get more diverse applicants. Do you want to touch on that for a minute?
Yeah, I can kind of yeah, I can kind of go off of what Anushka was saying, because that's literally my whole, like, I'm super like, that's something I'm super interested in, is just like, because where I grew up, I'm like, the only things that we were like, oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be like, you know, we saw cops, we saw nurses, and we saw doctors, and we're like, we can do all of these things. I didn't see a marine biologist. I didn't see fishermen. I didn't see that stuff. So like, it's not something that you immediately know about unless you are interested in it, and then you start to explore that. But I think a big thing is, like you guys were saying, just bringing it to the classroom. When you have a career day, bring a fisherman, like bring someone in aquaculture and be like, this is what I do on a daily basis. I get to go on a boat and I get to collect fish, and like we get to do all this stuff. Like that has never really, from my perspective, been done. And so it's really just like making these programs, but then bringing these programs to the youth and like really connecting them to this possibility, because they don't even know about it, unless like you're, you know, somehow kind of fall into it in some way. But it's just making these programs for these children, and then literally just bringing it to the classroom. Like, here, I'm going to show you how to use this microscope. I'm going to show you how to, you know, a video, maybe don't dissect in a classroom, but like a video of a dissection. And like, I'll bring you to the lab one day, and like, we can go on the boat safely, of course. But my point is like physically bringing these kids and this youth to aquaculture and being like, this is a viable option as a career, as something to do. And like, it's so vast that there's so much you can get into in aquaculture and in like ocean science in general. So it's just like making programs, but like not just making them, but like bringing them to them, you know?
And bringing in a more intentional way of meeting people where they are with their environmental education. So culturally, like, again, if people can't swim and you want to take them on the boat, you have to take that into consideration. If they've never seen an oyster before, you have to take that into consideration with whatever program that you have. Another kind of, you know, little plug I'll do is that if anybody's looking at diversifying their applicant pool, reach out to Minorities in Aquaculture. We can be that bridge. We can build that dialogue in between your organization and our minority women and the minorities that we're gonna be engaging with. So closing out, thank you so much, ladies, for this incredible conversation. Thank you to the summit for having us here and giving us a platform to be able to do this. So thank you, everybody. Check out our website, check out our social medias, check out what we're doing for the rest of this year and for many years to come. So Miriam, I will turn it back over to you.
Imani, Taja, Anushka, and Natalie, thank you so much for a great discussion. Really, this was very informative, and I really learned a lot.